In life, we are given many choices. An infinite number of paths lie before us, and every morning when we wake up, we're asked to pave that path for ourselves. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of fucking pressure. But you know what? It's also freaking beautiful and empowering. With the right effort in the right places, we can shape our lives in the way we want them. And I was reminded of this fact after revisiting Walt Disney's 2007 film, Meet the Robinsons. Now, it had been a while since I dusted this movie off. I remembered the story, and I remembered it resonating with me when I was younger, but I think most of that was due to the fact that it was about time travel, and 8-year-old me was obsessed with Back to the Future. I had recently been falling in love with the movie again indirectly through the soundtrack, specifically the song Another Believer. Now, of course, I also love Little Wonders, but this particular song just struck me. I can't play it in the video for copyright reasons, but I'll leave a link in the description in case you want to listen to it after this video. Anyway, I gotta say, this movie isn't as good as I remember. It's better. The themes in this film are enough to make a grown man cry. Well, at least this grown man. There's just so much packed into this little hour-and-a-half trip. It's got self-doubt, blind optimism, lifelong resentment, betrayal, mind control, and a lot of time paradoxes. Seriously, after the events of this movie, the space-time continuum would be more fucked up than Snoop Dogg in a weed farm. For real though, there's so much to talk about in this movie, and I think since Lewis and Goob have so many story parallels, I'll just talk about the two of them, starting with Lewis is our protagonist. He's an extremely bright young kid who was left in an orphanage by his mother when he was just a baby. Since then, he's spent nearly 13 years growing into the young scientist he is today, building small inventions here and there. However, his passion for inventing only seems to be a hindrance in his journey to find a family. He's just a little too eccentric for his own good. And seeing as none of his inventions seem to work, it only makes him more frustrated. Having such intense passion, and it only lead to things quite literally blowing up in his face, kinda beats Lewis down. However, he stays optimistic, putting all of his effort into his memory scanner. He knows that if he can make it work, he'll be able to see what his mother looked like and track her down. And this is where the blind optimism part comes in, because he fully believes that if he showed up at his mother's doorstep, she'd welcome him back with open arms. The reality would probably be such an awkward and heartbreaking moment. But still, he makes his machine and he goes to show it off at the science fair. Everything is in place for him to wow the audience, but unfortunately Goob, his roommate, sabotages his project. No, not that Goob. This Goob. He's from the future and has a personal vendetta against Lewis, which I'll go more into detail with during his portion of the video. Anyway, the machine fails due to Goob's tampering and Lewis truly feels like a failure. He put everything into that project and this is the last straw. All of his determination, tenacity, and hope has just flown out the window. Heck, even when Wilbur, his future son, tries to convince him that he has potential and to do great things, he says this:
"My project didn't work because I'm no good."
It's incredibly tragic to see. A kid staring at both his father and idol, a man who he grew up knowing as the guy who persevered through any hardship, just give up. See himself only for his failures. Ignore all of the work he's put into himself and just fold his deck of cards. It really resonated with me because I suffer with self-doubt as much as anybody else. It's hard to have an intense passion for something and constantly feel like it's going nowhere. You can have the best days, weeks, or even months, but all it takes is that one really bad day, that one screw up to make you feel like you're just a failure. To make you feel like you've wasted all your time. To make your dreams seem fruitless. But this movie teaches otherwise. Because throughout Lewis's journey through time, he realizes that life will throw difficult things your way, but you can't let that get to you. After all, failure is just a gateway to success. Because even in failure, you've learned something. And that knowledge is powerful. It's that next stepping stone, and heck, maybe you have to fail 100 times. Maybe your perspective will shift along the way, maybe you'll even realize that the thing you thought would solve all of your problems was never the answer to begin with. But you know what? You'll be better for it. And more than anything, when you finally get that win, when you finally get what you've wanted, it'll be more meaningful. Because you'll feel like you earned it. And that's one of the things that makes life worth living. Goob's story, as I mentioned earlier, mirrors Lewis's in a powerful way. While Lewis showed us that if you let something go, it can keep you from reaching your potential, Goob's story shows us the horrors that come when you hold on to something for life. When you go through something tragic and let it fester inside of you, never allowing yourself to move on. Like I said, Goob developed a personal vendetta against Lewis and made it his goal to ruin his life. To strip the Robinson name from the future he had come to know. But why is that? Well, we find out that on the very same day of Lewis's science fair, Goob had a big baseball game. And since Lewis had been keeping him awake working on his project, Goob fell asleep during the game and missed the winning catch, causing him to be torn apart verbally and physically by his teammates. While we can all look at this and see that it's bad, we can kind of shrug it off. But this becomes a core memory for Goob, all of his self-worth wrapped into a single moment. This event traumatizes him, and that trauma takes control of him. It takes that gaze off of the future and even tarnishes how he views the present. He decides to live the rest of his life as a victim and a slave to this one failure, which leads him to never getting adopted and growing old alone. And once he's hit absolute rock bottom and wants his revenge, what does he do? He goes to egg the Robinsons' house. No out of this world evil plot, just a man who feels like he truly has nothing. And blaming all of that on a kid he used to share a room with years ago. If any one of us saw someone doing this, we wouldn't be worried about them, we wouldn't see them as a threat, we'd quickly be able to see how broken they are. Maybe even suggest they get help. We'd be sad. But that's the unfortunate thing. That's not what happens. Instead, he meets Doris, a robot that was designed by Lewis himself and has also developed a personal vendetta against him. And she makes it clear that his anger isn't just justified, but that he should be doing more, managing to get him to work with her. True evil preys on the vulnerability of the broken, and Doris took full advantage of Goob's brokenness. He was so jaded, so broken down, had been upset for so many years that it felt like sunk cost. He couldn't just accept it now. Come to terms with it and admit to himself that he's been holding on to something silly his whole life would only make him more depressed, more self-sabotaging. He needed this to be real. A realization of this magnitude needed to happen under the right circumstances, and we see that play out. Goob learns of Doris's true intentions and sees the horrific future that she set out to create, and we're left with a bit of an ambiguous ending for Goob. Sure, we see that Lewis ends up changing the timeline, meaning Goob never ends up like this in the first place, which again, time paradox, but I digress. The evil Goob we've come to know finally reaches acceptance. After all of this time, all of this wasted time, he has to set out on his own. That resentment had been his North Star for so long, his obsession. Now he's left wondering what's next. And I was just rewatching this movie with my roommate, and when he saw Goob had written a question mark on his to-do list, he said, "Oh, that's kinda sad." But I looked at him and said, "No, that's beautiful. This man is finally free. Free from his grief. Free to find his purpose, even if he doesn't know what that is yet. Because that's life. Even though he has no idea what lies ahead, he needs to accept the possibilities of what his future could hold, and keep moving forward." If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching my video. As much as I'd like to joke around and make y'all laugh, I also love that I can use this channel as an outlet to talk about real stuff like this. It's therapeutic for me, and I hope it gives your brain something to think about. If you're feeling kinda lost right now, try giving this movie a watch. It's comforting to remind yourself that you have the power to shape your own life, even when it doesn't feel like you can. You are not defined by your past, and your future isn't written yet, so make today count. I'll see you in the next one.